Good evening. The headlines tonight. Kofi Annan meets Bashar al-Assad to ask for an immediate ceasefire between the army and opposition fighters. Widespread protests are being staged in Russia against Vladimir Putin's victory in last weekend's presidential election. And Prince Harry celebrated Anglo-Brazilian relations, describing how the two countries were forging bonds that will stand the test of time. There are renewed diplomatic efforts to end the violence in Syria. Former United Nations Chief Kofi Annan is meeting Syria's President Bashar al-Assad to ask for an immediate ceasefire between the army as well as the opposition fighters. But many opposition leaders say it is now too late for talks. The UN now says more than 7,000 people have died since the violence began, with millions more across the country in desperate need of food aid. UN Arab League envoy Kofi Annan met Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to press for a political solution to Syria's year-long uprising and bloody crackdown, in which thousands of people have been killed. Syrian television reported that the two men had begun talks in the presidential palace. Annan met Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Cairo before flying to Damascus in a mark of the pivotal part Moscow, one of Assad's few foreign friends, could play in a solution. The Russian Foreign Ministry said Lavrov had reiterated Moscow's calls for an end to violence and the start of dialogue, and emphasized its opposition to foreign interference. Annan confirmed his intention of interacting actively with Russia in resolving the Syrian crisis, a Russian Foreign Ministry statement said. Annan also plans to meet Syrian dissidents before leaving Damascus on Sunday. He has called for a political solution, but the opposition says the time for a dialogue is over. We support any initiative that aims to stop the killings, but we reject it if it is going to give Bashar more time to break the revolution and keep him in power. Melam al-Drubi, a Saudi-based member of the Muslim Brotherhood and of the exiled Syrian National Council, told Reuters by telephone, "We hope that Annan convinces Bashar to stop the killings, step down, and call for a parliamentary election," he said, expressing skepticism that Assad would respond positively. Annan's trip to Damascus followed a violent day in which activists said Assad's forces killed at least 72 people as they bombarded parts of the rebellious city of Homs and sought to deter demonstrators and crush insurgents elsewhere. 2 soldiers and 3 rebels were killed in overnight clashes in the town of Dariyah, in the southeastern outskirts of Damascus, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said. Decisive victory has eluded both sides in an increasingly deadly struggle that began as a mainly peaceful protest movement a year ago, and now appears to be sliding into civil war. The United Nations estimates that Syrian security forces have killed well over 7,500 people. Syria said in December that terrorists had killed more than 2,000 soldiers and police. Lavrov was due to meet Arab foreign ministers in Cairo later in the day, on the sidelines of an Arab League meeting on Syria. Russia and China vetoed a UN draft resolution last month which would have backed an Arab League plan, calling for Assad to step aside as part of a detailed transition plan to democracy. Both countries say they support Annan's mission, but Russia has resisted Western and Arab demands for Assad to quit, saying no such outcome can be predetermined or imposed from outside. If Annan can persuade Russia to back a transitional plan, the regime would be confronted with the choice of either agreeing to negotiate in good faith or facing near total isolation through loss of a key ally. The Brussels-based International Crisis Group said in a paper this week. Annan had discussed his mission on Friday in a call with UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon and the head of Cairo-based Arab League, Nibal al-Abri. I have very strongly urged Kofi Annan to ensure there must be an immediate ceasefire, Ban told reporters in New York after the call. After a ceasefire, he said, there should be inclusive political solutions found through dialogue. Chinese and Russian reluctance to approve any UN resolution on Syria stems partly from their fear that it could be used to justify a Libya-style military intervention, although Western powers deny an intention to go to war again in Syria. Russia, an old ally of Damascus and its main arms supplier, has defended Assad against his Western and Arab critics. A Russian diplomat said this week Assad was battling Al-Qaeda-backed militants, including 15,000 foreign fighters, who would seize cities if Syrian troops withdrew. The Syrian opposition denies any Al-Qaeda role in the uprising, but Islamists are among rebels who have taken up arms against Assad under the banner of the Free Syrian Army. France said it would not accept any UN Security Council resolution which would assign responsibility for the violence in Syria equally between the Syrian government and the opposition. There is no equivalence between the savage repression that Bashar al-Assad's clan has perpetuated for months and the legitimate desire of the Syrian people for the respect of their rights, said Foreign Ministry spokesman Bernard Valero. Foreign Minister Alain Juppe denied Russian suggestions that the West was seeking a pretext for military action. The option of any military intervention is not on the table, he said. US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Lavrov, her Russian counterpart, will meet in New York on Monday on the sidelines of a special UN Security Council ministerial meeting on Arab revolts, with Syria likely to be a central topic. Others taking part in the council session are Juppe and British Foreign Secretary William Hague. China will be represented at the ambassadorial level. Widespread protests are being staged in Russia against Vladimir Putin's victory in last weekend's presidential election. There is tight security on the streets in Moscow, where several thousand Russians gathered in central Moscow for a rally seen as a test of the opposition's ability to mount a sustained challenge to President-elect Vladimir Putin. Demonstrators carried white balloons and wore white ribbons, the symbols of protests that began over a disputed parliamentary poll on December the 4th, and are intended now to highlight allegations of fraud in the presidential election Putin won on March the 4th. Putin's opponents hope to attract a large crowd to maintain the momentum of rallies, which could quickly fade following Putin's triumph, and the detention of hundreds of people during or after protests on Monday. Early signs were that the protest would be smaller than the largest protests that have attracted tens of thousands of people over the past 3 months. The mood was relaxed on a cold but sunny day on Moscow's Novy Abrat Street at a rally approved by the city authorities. Police were out in force and 2 helicopters hovered overhead. Protests leaders addressed the crowd from a stage bearing the slogans "For new elections" and "These are not elections, this is not a president." These authorities are legitimate, and opposition leader and protest organizer told the crowd. The same people are in power, the same people who took away our right to choose, the same people who destroyed freedom of speech and political competition, he said. We will continue to demand deep political reforms and new elections. We will continue to demand they free all political prisoners. We will continue to demand freedom of speech and the media. Liberal opposition leader Grigory Velevinsky, who was barred from running in the presidential election, told reporters that people should be patient as they seek to change the political system which is dominated by Putin. If this system took 15 or so years to be created, we need a few years, 3, 4, 5, to dismantle it. Of course we need it. That's why we need these demonstrations, he said. International election monitors say the presidential election was clearly skewed in Putin's favor, but the Central Election Commission, said there were no serious violations. The protest organizers say there were many examples of cheating, and that Putin probably won far fewer votes than the official tally of more than 63%. They refused to recognize the official results. And finally, Prince Harry celebrated Anglo-Brazilian relations, describing how the 2 countries were forging bonds that will stand the test of time. The royal's comments came as he launched the Great Initiative in Rio de Janeiro, a £25 million deal campaign that aims to capitalise on the London Olympics and Queen's Diamond Jubilee, and attract millions more to visit, study and do business within the UK during the next few years. Sugarloaf Mountain, Rio's landmark, was the venue for the event, and the best British was on display from car brands with long associations with Britain: Bentley, Aston Martin, Mini and Jaguar, to leading fashion labels including Vivienne Westwood, Stella McCartney and Burberry. Culture Secretary Jeremy Hunt and Chris Holmes, Britain's most successful Paralympic swimmer, the winner of 15 medals and the director of Paralympic Integration for London 2012, joined the Prince for the event. Harry told the audience, who included artists, cultural leaders, entrepreneurs and opinion formers from across Brazil, "It's wonderful to see here tonight so much that is truly great about Britain, and particularly about our flourishing partnership with Brazil." In business, the UK is now Brazil's fourth largest foreign investor. In education, innovation, technology, fashion, and even in shopping, Britons and Brazilians are forging bonds that will stand the test of time and will take us forward together into the 21st century. I feel that it's going to be a great era for our two countries, for the friendship between us. Something like a marriage. Now there's an idea. Rio is one of 14 key cities identified for Britain's biggest ever tourism campaign, including Mumbai, Sao Paulo, and Shanghai. The launch followed others in New York and Los Angeles, and the campaign will head to New Delhi, Melbourne, and Tokyo. Amongst the guests was model Lily Cole, a supporter of the Great Campaign, who said, "There are things that Britain does that there are here to be celebrated. I'm proud to be a part of that celebration, and I think it's wonderful to be in Rio too. And Brazil is doing so amazingly as a country. It is an exciting time." Also among the guests was Brazilian TV talk show host and underwear model Luciana Gimenez, who had a child with Rolling Stone Mick Jagger. Gimenez looked stunning in a blue bandage mini dress. When Harry first arrived at Sugarloaf Mountain, he was greeted by scores of screaming girls and Unido del Lela, a samba band which paraded at this year's Rio Carnival, but he resisted the urge to move to the pulsating rhythms. The Royals' keynote speech was introduced by the Culture Secretary and footballer David Beckham, who spoke via a video, and told the Prince to get the party started like only he can. In his address, Harry joked about his brother, the Duke of Cambridge, being a bad dancer, saying, "But everything about Rio makes you want to dance. I'm just so thankful that my brother isn't here, because he might actually do it, and that would not be cool." The royal described how it had been a burning ambition of his to come to the country. "I can hardly believe I'm here. Over the years I've seen and heard so much about this extraordinary place. In fact, ever since my father told me about a certain dance he once had with a beautiful girl called Pina, it just seems to have struck in his mind for some reason." Brazilian-born designer Daniela Halale, founder of the label Issa, is a favourite with the Duchess of Cambridge, and who created her much-copied engagement dress, was also a guest. Ms. Halale staged a fashion show at the event, much to the delight of Prince Harry, who smiled broadly and clapped during the presentation of her designs. Guests at the event dined on a special menu devised by the renowned British and Brazilian chefs Marcus Waring and Roberta Sudbrack. Prince Harry also toured a presentation of James Bond memorabilia, which included Odd Jobs' bowler hat and the Sugarloaf Mountain cable car that featured in the scene of a showdown between the Bond villain Jaws and Roger Moore's Bond in the 1979 Moonraker. Later, Harry will start to take part in a sport relief mile run with groups of children and young adults. Brazilian Adriana Beira, one of the world's outstanding beach volleyball players of her generation, will take a training session on Rio's Flamengo beach tomorrow with Harry as one of her pupils. And the Prince will join former rugby player Wayne Morris, now head of community at Premiership Rugby, for a touch rugby session. Rugby is a growing sport in Brazil and will be an Olympic sport for the first time in 2016 when Rio hosts the Games. During the day, Harry will also tour a Rio favela or slum to see the various projects from a cricket match to a community centre and health unit. And that's it. Good night.